Okay, today talking about special right triangles. Our first one is a 45, 45, 90 triangle, and that's referring to the angle measures. When two angles are congruent, that also means then two sides are congruent, and they happen to be the legs of our right triangle. And in this relationship, in a 45, 45, 90 triangle, the hypotenuse is the square root of 2 times as long as each leg. Alright, so an equation, hypotenuse equals the leg times the square root of 2. And you'll see me abbreviated as h equals L times the square root of 2. Hypotenuse equals leg times the square root of 2. Alright, so for these first two examples here, find the length of the hypotenuse. Alright, we have 45, we have 90, this angle obviously has to be 45. So we have a 45, 45, 90 triangle. 6 represents the leg. We have the equation hypotenuse equals the leg times the square root of 2. And when you're doing your work, I expect to see this general equation for your special right triangle. Alright, now I'll substitute the values in. The hypotenuse equals 6, that's the leg, times the square root of 2. There you're done. Hypotenuse equals 6 square root of 2. This one here, this triangle. Alright, we have 4 square root of 2, 4 square root of 2. What does that tell us about our triangle? Well, two legs are congruent, that means these angles are congruent, which means they have to be 45 and 45. Alright, so again, we have a 45, 45, 90, so we have the equation hypotenuse equals the leg times the square root of 2. Hypotenuse we don't know, and the leg is 4 square root of 2, then times the square root of 2. Okay, so the hypotenuse equals square root of 2 times the square root of 2 is the square root of 4, which is 2, so 4 times 2, so the hypotenuse equals 8. Alright, now the other special right triangle is a 30, 60, 90 triangle. Again, that's referring to our angle measures. Alright, and the hypotenuse here, across from the right angle, is twice as long as the shorter leg. And the longer leg is the square root of 3 times as long as the shorter leg. So we have these two equations here for 30, 60, 90. Hypotenuse equals 2 times the shorter leg. And again, you're talking about 30, 60, that's the smaller side, that's the smaller angle, that's the smaller side. This is bigger than 30, so then this side has to be bigger than that side. And our other equation, the longer leg equals the shorter leg times the square root of 3. And again, I use these two equations. The hypotenuse equals 2 times the shorter leg, and the longer leg equals the shorter leg times the square root of 3. Okay? Alright, make a guitar pick that resembles an equilateral triangle. Equilateral triangle. So right away, it's equilateral. We also know it is equiangular, which means all the angles are 60 degrees. Alright? And it has side lengths of 32 millimeters. Alright, what is the approximate height of the pick? Alright, so that's 60, that's 90, because we dropped that altitude down, so this angle here has to be 30 degrees. So right now, D, this actually should be B. BDC, that triangle, is a 30, 60, 90 triangle. This is 32, that's 16. Okay, and H, the height, is the longer leg. Longer leg equals the shorter leg times the square root of 3. The longer leg is H. The shorter leg is 16 times the square root of 3. And that's millimeters. Now, what is the approximate height? That means plug it into your calculator. So we have 16 times the square root of 3, which is, the height is about 27.7 millimeters. Okay? Find the values of x and y. Write your answer in simplest radical form. So now we're not plugging it into our calculator, we're keeping it with a radical. Alright, so we have a 30, 60, 90. We have x, y, and then 8. Now, if you don't know which equation to start with, write them both. We have the hypotenuse equals 2 times the shorter leg, and the longer leg equals the shorter leg times the square root of 3. Hypotenuse here is y equals 2, and the shorter leg is x. Can you solve that equation? No. Okay? So we go over here. The longer leg equals 8. The shorter leg is x times the square root of 3. Okay? Solving for x, we divide by the square root of 3. Those cancel out. We're left with x equals 8 divided by the square root of 3. Now, if you remember back to your algebra days, we cannot have a square root in the denominator. Okay? So we need to multiply by square root of 3 divided by the square root of 3. If you think about that, square root of 3 divided by square root of 3 is 1. If you multiply times 1, you're not changing the value. All we're going to be doing is changing the way this is going to look. Alright? So here we get x equals 8 times the square root of 3. And in the denominator we got square root of 3 times square root of 3, which is the square root of 9, which is 3. So x equals 8 square root of 3 over 3. So that's x. Okay, here we go. We have this equation. Plug in. Y equals 2 times x, which is 8 square root of 3 over 3. Again, you can write 2 as a fraction, 2 over 1. So multiply. Y equals 2 times 8 is 16. Square root of 3. 1 times 3 is 3. So y equals 16 square root of 3 over 3. Alright, so we have 45, 45, 90 triangle, which is the hypotenuse equals the leg times the square root of 2. And we have a 30, 60, 90 triangle. Hypotenuse equals 2 times the shorter leg. The longer leg equals the shorter leg times the square root of 3. So you have 3 equations, one for the 45, 45, 90, and 2 equations for the 30, 60, 90 triangles. Alright, and these are special right triangles because these relationships will always hold for these specific triangles. Okay? If you have any questions, please come to class with those questions. Thanks a lot.